Never underestimate the quietest woman in the room, especially when she's smiling softly and typing away on an old laptop. My name is Lauren Hayes. I'm 36, and for the past 8 years, I've been working at Hawthorne Metrics as the head of financial strategy. It's a mid-sized financial analytics firm based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. What my colleagues don't know is that I'm also their landlord. I inherited a substantial sum from my grandmother 3 years ago. Instead of splurging on a vacation home or a luxury car like most people might, I followed her most important lesson. Real wealth is invisible. Lauren, the richest person in the room, rarely looks it. So I channeled her inheritance into creating West Mill Partners, a property investment company that quietly acquired the building where Hawthorne Metrics rents its headquarters. Not even our CEO knows that the mysterious West Mill Partners LLC listed on our lease agreement is actually me. I've never felt the need to mention it. I come to work promptly at 8, eat my modest lunch in the break room, attend meetings, and lead my team with the same dedication I've always had. I love my job. I love analyzing financial trends, creating risk mitigation strategies, and helping our clients navigate uncertain markets. My MBA from Wharton has served me well, giving me the theoretical foundation that, combined with practical experience, has helped me build a respected career. Or at least, I thought it was respected. Things started changing 6 months ago when Hawthorne hired a new business development team. Nathan Croft and his crew of 4 men came in with their slick haircuts, custom suits, and an arrogance that immediately set my teeth on edge. They were loud, domineering in meetings, and seemed determined to reshape our company culture into something that resembled a fraternity rather than a professional workplace. At first, I ignored them. Office politics had never interested me, and I was too busy focusing on an upcoming client presentation to care about their posturing. But then came that fateful lunch break. I was sitting alone in the break room, reviewing quarterly projections on my laptop while eating a salad. Nathan and his team sauntered in, laughing about some client they'd just closed. They took the table next to mine, their voices carrying throughout the room. "So Hayes is presenting at the board meeting tomorrow," Nathan said, not bothering to lower his voice despite my obvious presence. "Can you believe they're letting someone from strategy take up valuable time that could be used to discuss actual revenue?" One of his cronies, I think his name was Derek, snorted. "What do you expect? She's got that fancy MBA she likes to flash around. All theory, no practice." "Exactly," Nathan agreed, his voice dripping with condescension. "Those expensive pieces of paper aren't worth the ink they're printed with. In the real world, it's all about closing deals and bringing in money." I kept my eyes fixed on my screen, my fingers still on the keyboard. "Look at her," Nathan stage whispered, probably crunching numbers that no one cares about. "Hey, Hayes," he called out, forcing me to acknowledge him. "How much did that MBA cost? Was it worth the student loans?" I looked up, meeting his gaze directly. I didn't respond immediately, which seemed to encourage him. "I'm just saying, in the time you spent in those classrooms, I closed 50 million in deals. Real experience. That MBA is just an expensive piece of paper." The others laughed, and I noticed a few other colleagues in the break room looking uncomfortable but remaining silent. I simply smiled, closed my laptop, and replied, "Everyone values different things, Nathan." Then I packed up my lunch and left. But something had shifted inside me. Not because I cared about Nathan's opinion, I didn't, but because his attitude represented something toxic that was spreading through our company culture, something that needed to be addressed. That night, I called Joan Becker, my attorney who handles all West Mill Partners affairs. "Joan, I need to review our tenant agreements for the Hawthorne building," I told her. "Any particular reason?" she asked. Joan had been my grandmother's attorney before becoming mine, and she knew that I rarely made impulsive decisions. "It's time to reassess our rental strategy," I said carefully, "particularly for the 3rd floor." The 3rd floor was where Nathan and his business development team had their offices. "I see," Joan said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Shall I prepare the standard rate increase documentation, or are we looking at something more Targeted. Let's start with a comprehensive review. I want to know all our options. The next morning, I went to work as usual. I delivered my presentation to the board, outlining a risk management strategy that would potentially save the company millions over the next 5 years. It was well received, despite Nathan's pointed questions attempting to undermine my analysis. Over the next few weeks, I noticed that Nathan and his team were systematically trying to edge me out of strategic decisions. They began scheduling important meetings when I was known to be with clients. They lobbied to reduce my department's budget, claiming that financial strategy wasn't revenue-generating and therefore less essential. I documented everything meticulously, every email, every meeting request, every budget discussion. Meanwhile, I was working with Joan to prepare something special. 60 days later, Hawthorne Metrics received an official notice from Westmill Partners. The rent was being increased threefold, effective in 60 days. No extensions, no negotiations. The notice specified that certain floors, particularly the third floor, would be subject to additional premium location fees due to their favorable positioning and superior facilities. The company exploded into panic. Our CEO, Michael Donovan, called an emergency meeting of all department heads. I sat quietly as he explained the situation. "This is unprecedented," Michael said, his face flushed with stress. "We've been in this building for 12 years. We've always had a good relationship with the landlords. I don't understand why they're suddenly squeezing us like this." Nathan scoffed. "It's obvious what they're doing. These property investment vultures wait until companies are established and can't easily relocate. Then they jack up the prices. We should tell them to go to hell and find a new building." I remained silent, watching as Nathan positioned himself as the voice of righteous indignation. "I've already looked into alternative locations," Michael replied, running a hand through his thinning hair. "There's nothing comparable within a 10-mile radius that could accommodate our operations. And relocating further would mean losing a significant portion of our workforce who chose to work here because of the location. So we negotiate," Nathan insisted. "No one increases rent by 300% unless they're starting with a ridiculously high number to eventually settle for a 50% increase. Basic negotiation tactics." "The notice specifically states non-negotiable," Michael pointed out. "They all say that." Nathan dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Trust me, I'll handle this. Business development is all about relationships and negotiations. Let me speak to these Westmill people." Michael hesitated, then nodded. "All right, set up a meeting. But be careful. We can't afford to lose this location." After the meeting, I returned to my office and sent a simple text to Joan. They took the bait. The next day, Nathan strutted into Michael's office, looking triumphant. "I've got a meeting set up with Westmill's representatives tomorrow at 2 p.m. Don't worry, I'll make them see reason." What Nathan didn't know was that the meeting would be with Joan Becker, who had strict instructions about how to handle the negotiation. I wasn't in the meeting, of course, but Joan recorded it, legally, with notification, as was her standard practice. She played it for me that evening. Nathan had started with bluster, threatening to move the entire company and leave Westmill with an empty building. Joan had listened politely, then pulled out market research showing that commercial real estate in our area was in extremely high demand, with waiting lists for comparable spaces. "Mr. Croft," Joan had said in her crisp, professional tone. "Westmill Partners is not in the business of negotiating below market rates. The current adjustment merely brings your rent in line with actual market value. We've been quite generous for the past several years." Nathan had then tried charm, which fell flat against Joan's professional demeanor. Finally, he'd resorted to thinly veiled threats about his connections in the real estate world who could make things difficult for Westmill. That's when Joan had dropped the bomb. "Mr. Croft, I should inform you that Westmill Partners owns not just your building, but 7 other commercial properties in this district. Your connections would be interested to know that we've already received inquiries from 3 Fortune 500 companies looking to establish regional headquarters in this exact area. We're not dependent on Hawthorne Metrics tenancy, though we value your business when conducted professionally." Nathan had left the meeting with nothing. Worse, he'd damaged the relationship further with his aggressive approach. The following day, Michael called me into his office. His expression was grave. "Lauren, I need your help." The meeting with Westmill was a disaster. Nathan completely mishandled it, and now they're threatening to not renew our lease at all if we try to negotiate further. I feigned surprise. "That's concerning. What can I do?" "You've always been good with financial analysis. I need you to look at our options. Can we afford this increase? What would relocation costs look like? I need numbers, scenarios, contingency plans, everything." "Of course," I said. "I'll start right away." For the next week, I prepared a comprehensive analysis. I showed that while the rent increase was substantial, relocation would cost even more when factoring in moving expenses, lost productivity, potential employee turnover, and the higher market rates at any comparable location. My conclusion was clear. Despite the bitter pill, staying was our best financial option. I also included an analysis of departmental space utilization, showing that some departments, particularly business development, were using disproportionately large amounts of space relative to their contribution to company revenue. Michael reviewed my report carefully. "This is excellent work, Lauren, very thorough. But there's something I don't understand. How did you get such detailed information about Westmill Partners' other properties and their rental strategies? This looks like insider information." I maintained eye contact as I replied. "I have a contact in commercial real estate who helped me with market research." Michael studied me for a long moment. "A contact." He set down the report. "Lauren, what's really going on here? This rent increase came out of nowhere, and it seems almost personal, especially the premium on the third floor." I considered my options. I had never planned to reveal my ownership of the building, but the situation had evolved in ways I hadn't anticipated. Nathan had gone from being merely obnoxious to actively undermining me and my entire department. That morning, I had discovered that Nathan had submitted a formal proposal to Michael suggesting that my department be dissolved and its functions outsourced to a consulting firm, coincidentally owned by one of Nathan's former colleagues. It was time to show my hand. "Michael, there's something you should know." I pulled out a folder from my briefcase and slid it across his desk. "These are the incorporation documents for Westmill Partners, LLC. He opened the folder, his brow furrowed in confusion. Then his eyes widened as he saw my name listed as the owner and managing partner. "You," he began, then stopped, stunned into silence. "Yes, I own the building." "For how long?" 3 years now. I purchased it through Westmill after receiving an inheritance from my grandmother." Michael leaned back in his chair, processing this information. "And the rent increase? The premium on the third floor?" I handed him another folder. "This is a copy of a proposal Nathan submitted yesterday, recommending that my entire department be eliminated. It's full of misrepresentations about our work and our value to the company. He's been systematically trying to undermine me for months, scheduling key meetings when I'm unavailable, blocking my department's initiatives, and disparaging my qualifications to anyone who will listen." Michael looked through the documents, his face darkening as he read. "I've never used my position as your landlord to influence company matters," I continued. "But I will not stand by while someone tries to dismantle a department that has saved this company millions through sound financial strategy. The rent increase is real. Property values in this area have indeed risen substantially, but the targeting of the third floor was deliberate. This is—" Michael struggled to find the right words. "Unexpected. I understand this puts you in an awkward position." I acknowledged. "But I wanted you to have all the facts before the board meeting tomorrow where Nathan planned to present his proposal." Michael was quiet for a long time. "Finally," he said, "I need to think about this. Can you leave these documents with me?" I nodded and stood to leave. At the door, I paused. "Michael, regardless of what happens next, I want you to know that I've always valued working here. My actions weren't taken lightly." The next morning, I arrived at work to find an email calling for an emergency board meeting at 10 a.m. All department heads were required to attend. I prepared myself for whatever might come, possibly even my own dismissal. As I entered the boardroom, I noticed Nathan and his team sitting together, looking smug. Michael sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. I took my seat quietly. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Michael began. "We have two significant issues to discuss today. First, our lease situation, and second, a proposal regarding departmental restructuring." He nodded to Nathan, who stood up with a self-satisfied smile. "As you all know, we're facing an unreasonable rent increase from our landlords. However, I've been working on a solution that will not only address this issue but also streamline our operations for greater efficiency and profitability." Nathan launched into his presentation, explaining how outsourcing non-essential functions like financial strategy would save money that could be applied to the increased rent. He painted my department as a cost center rather than a value creator, using cherry-picked data that ignored the long-term value of risk management and strategic financial planning. When he finished, looking pleased with himself, Michael thanked him and then turned to me. "Lauren, would you like to respond to this proposal?" I stood, feeling all eyes on me. "Yes, I would." I distributed copies of a report I had prepared overnight. This analysis shows the actual financial impact of my department's work over the past 5 years. We've saved the company $12.3 million through risk mitigation strategies, identified investment opportunities that yielded $8.7 million in returns, and created financial models that improved client retention by 23%. I walked them through the numbers methodically, pointing out how Nathan's proposal had misrepresented or omitted key data. Furthermore, I continued, outsourcing these functions would create significant security risks with our proprietary financial models and client data. When I finished, the room was silent. Nathan looked uncomfortable, but still confident. Michael cleared his throat. "Thank you, Lauren. Now, regarding our lease situation, I have some information to share with the board." He looked directly at me, and I gave him a slight nod. "I've discovered that Westmill Partners, our landlord, is actually owned by one of our own employees." Murmurs of surprise filled the room. All eyes turned to me as Michael continued. "Lauren Hayes has been the owner of our building for the past 3 years, operating through Westmill Partners, LLC. Nathan's face contorted in shock, then anger. "This is a conflict of interest. She's been using her position to what, exactly?" Michael interrupted. "In 3 years, there has never been a rent increase until now. And the timing of this increase coincides with your campaign to diminish Lauren's department and role within the company." Michael turned to the board. "I've reviewed all the documentation. Lauren's analysis of our options is sound. Relocating would cost us more than accepting the rent increase. And her department's value to this company has been consistently underrepresented in Nathan's proposal." He looked at Nathan. "What concerns me more is the pattern of behavior demonstrated in these emails and meeting notes." He held up the folder I had given him. "They show a deliberate attempt to undermine a valuable department based on personal bias rather than business acumen." The board members looked through the documents that were passed around. The atmosphere in the room had shifted dramatically. Based on these findings, Michael continued, "I'm recommending that we reject the proposal to outsource our financial strategy department. Furthermore, I believe we need to address the unprofessional behavior that has been occurring." One of the board members, Janet Wilson, spoke up. "If I'm reading this correctly, Nathan and his team have been engaging in what amounts to workplace harassment and manipulation. This goes against our company values and policies." Nathan stood up, his face red. "This is ridiculous. She's your landlord, and you're taking her side? She's threatening the entire company with this rent increase." "Actually," I interjected calmly, "the rent increase brings the rate in line with current market values, as documented in the independent appraisal included in my report. The premium on the 3rd floor can be negotiated. I've never used my position as the building owner to influence company matters before, and I'd prefer not to start now." Another board member, Robert Chen, looked thoughtful. The timing is certainly suspect from both sides. However, the documentation regarding Mr. Croft's behavior is concerning. This goes beyond normal workplace competition. Michael nodded. That's my assessment as well. Therefore, I'm recommending disciplinary action for Nathan Croft and a review of the business development department's practices and culture. Nathan exploded. This is a setup. She's manipulating all of you. I've brought in more revenue in 6 months than her department has in 3 years. Revenue isn't the only measure of value. Nathan, Michael said firmly, building sustainable business practices and managing financial risk are equally important. Your focus on short-term gains at the expense of long-term stability is exactly the kind of thinking that led to the 2008 financial crisis. The meeting continued for another hour as the board discussed the situation. Eventually, they voted unanimously to maintain my department and to place Nathan on probation pending a full investigation into his conduct. As we left the boardroom, Nathan cornered me in the hallway. This isn't over, Hayes. You may have won this round, but I won't forget this. I looked at him calmly. I'm not concerned with winning rounds. Nathan, I'm focused on doing my job well and contributing to this company's success. I suggest you do the same. In the weeks that followed, the investigation revealed further evidence of Nathan's inappropriate behavior, including sexist comments to female staff and taking credit for others' work. He was ultimately terminated, along with 2 members of his team who had been actively participating in his undermining tactics. As for the rent, I instructed Joan to remove the premium on the 3rd floor and to extend our normal lease terms, with a more modest increase that truly reflected market rates. It was never about the money. It was about respect and professional integrity. 6 months later, Hawthorne Metrics was thriving. We had implemented a new system for evaluating departmental contributions that looked beyond simple revenue metrics to include risk management, client retention, and strategic value. The toxic atmosphere that had been brewing had dissipated, and employee satisfaction scores were at an all-time high. Michael and I had developed a new level of mutual respect. He understood why I had kept my ownership of the building private, and I appreciated his willingness to look beyond the unusual circumstances to address the real issues at hand. One day, as I was eating lunch in the break room, a new junior analyst sat down across from me. Is it true that you own this building? She asked tentatively. I smiled and took a sip of my coffee. Yes, it is. And you never told anyone until you had to? I believe that actions speak louder than titles or possessions, I replied. What matters is how you contribute, how you treat others, and the integrity you bring to your work. She nodded thoughtfully. I heard about what happened with Nathan and his team. People say you taught them a lesson about respecting others' contributions. I considered this for a moment. I think the lesson was about recognizing that value comes in many forms. Nathan believed that only direct revenue generation had worth. He dismissed strategic thinking and risk management as theoretical rather than practical. Like how he made fun of your MBA, she asked, having clearly heard the office gossip. I laughed softly. Exactly. He thought my education was just an expensive piece of paper because he couldn't see its practical application. But that education gave me the tools to not only excel in my career, but also to recognize a sound investment when I saw this building for sale. I gathered my lunch containers as I prepared to return to my office. The real irony is that while he was mocking my theoretical knowledge, I was using it to make very practical decisions that ultimately affected his career. The young analyst looked at me with newfound respect. That's impressively badass, if you don't mind my saying so. I smiled. I don't mind at all. Just remember, never underestimate the quietest person in the room. They might own the room you're standing in. As I walked back to my office, I felt a sense of satisfaction not from Nathan's downfall, but from having protected something valuable. A workplace culture that respected diverse contributions and measured success by more than just the loudest voices or the most obvious metrics. My grandmother would have approved. Her final lesson to me had been about using power wisely. True power isn't about controlling others, Lauren, she had told me. It's about creating environments where good work can flourish. That's exactly what I intended to do. one quiet, strategic decision at a time. 12 months after the incident, I was sitting in my office reviewing quarterly projections when Michael knocked on my door. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Of course." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat down and placed a folder between us. "The board has been discussing our corporate structure, and we've made a decision I wanted to share with you personally before it's announced." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "We're creating a new position, Chief Risk and Strategy Officer. It would oversee both financial strategy and our long-term business development planning." He tapped the folder. "We'd like you to take the role." I was surprised. "That's a significant promotion." "It's well-deserved. Your department's approach to balanced growth and risk management has transformed how we evaluate opportunities. The board believes this perspective should be represented at the executive level." I opened the folder and scanned the job description and compensation package. It was impressive. "There's one more thing," Michael added. "Given your unique position as both an employee and our landlord, the board thought it might make sense to formalize the relationship." "What did you have in mind?" "We're proposing to purchase the building from Westmill Partners. It would eliminate any perceived conflict of interest and give the company a valuable asset. The offer is on page 3. I turned to the page and had to work to keep my expression neutral. The offer was substantially above market value. "This is generous," I said carefully. Michael shrugged. "It's practical. Commercial real estate in this area continues to appreciate, and owning rather than renting makes financial sense for a company of our size. Plus, it resolves the awkwardness of our current arrangement." I closed the folder. "I'll need time to consider both offers." "Of course, take the weekend. We'll talk on Monday." After Michael left, I sat back in my chair, thinking. The promotion was appealing. It would give me broader influence over the company's direction and recognize the value of my approach. The building offer was financially attractive, but selling would mean giving up a solid investment and the independence it represented. That evening, I called my grandmother's old friend and financial advisor, Eleanor, who had helped me establish Westmill Partners. "It's an interesting proposition," Eleanor said after I explained the situation. "What's your instinct telling you?" "That it's not about the money or the title," I replied. "It's about where I can have the most positive impact." "Your grandmother would say the same thing," Eleanor chuckled. "She never made a decision based solely on financial gain." We discussed the pros and cons for over an hour. By the end of the call, I had clarity. Monday morning, I walked into Michael's office with my decision. "I've thought about both offers," I told him. "I'm honored by the promotion and would be pleased to accept the CRSO position." Michael smiled. "Excellent. And the building?" "I've decided not to sell it this time." I handed him a counter-proposal I'd prepared. "However, I'm offering Hawthorne Metrics a 15-year lease at below-market rates, with options for expansion as the company grows. As CRSO, I'll recuse myself from any decisions involving our facilities to avoid conflicts of interest." Michael reviewed the proposal, his eyebrows rising. "These terms are very favorable to the company. I believe in Hawthorne's future. This arrangement allows me to maintain my personal investment while demonstrating my commitment to the company's long-term success." After a moment, Michael nodded. "The board will appreciate this approach. It's unconventional, but so are you, Lauren. I'll take that as a compliment." It was intended as one. He extended his hand. "Welcome to the executive team, Chief Risk and Strategy Officer Hayes." As I shook his hand, I felt a sense of completion. The path from that lunch break confrontation to this moment had been unexpected, but it had led to something better than mere vindication. It had created an opportunity to reshape a company culture, to elevate principles I believed in, and to prove that strategic thinking had very real, practical value. The quiet woman in the room had found her voice, not by shouting, but by demonstrating that power wielded wisely could lift everyone around her. As I left Michael's office, I passed the break room where I had once sat silently absorbing Nathan's mockery. Now, it was filled with teams collaborating across departments, respectfully sharing ideas and building on each other's strengths. That expensive piece of paper, my MBA, had taught me many things. But perhaps the most valuable lesson wasn't found in any textbook. Real influence comes not from asserting your power, but from using it to create something worthwhile. My grandmother would have been proud. And honestly, so was I.